granted, I know, Jessica, we've got more folks here because we've got the Housing Alliance, and we know that affordable housing is a issue, right?
That's why I'm saying, like, I absolutely agree with you, which is why I was asking if you were, because I've asked both you and Kathleen here to represent the employment side of the world. So that is why I was asking you to clarify. And I have asked people here to represent certain sectors, because what I am trying to come out of this is, okay, these are the issues in each, where can we come together?
Well, if I might, if I think about it, I just sort of see, so if I think about some of the issues were really important to folks, housing, a place they, a home, really. Also, what do we do during, meaningful activity during the day, and also a significant component in being able to secure that housing and be more independent is employment, right? So housing and employment, two, I think, huge priorities in our system. And then we look at the regional center system and other systems that support, because our services can support individuals with acquiring that employment, being supported with that employment, and that employment helps individuals gain greater independence and that housing, that for those individuals who want to live independently or who want a different living arrangement. And so it's sort of foundational, or definitely interdependent, right?
Well, they intersect, and that is what I was going to say to this group, is that regardless of who you specifically serve, they all intersect with each other, and at a point they all rely on each other, especially if you understand how they all intricately work.
I would add to that healthcare, having moved recently to this very rural 4 counties on the coast of Northern California, recognizing how difficult it is for anybody to find reasonable health care. And the farther north you go, the worse it gets. And I imagine Ruth sees that in some of the rural areas that North LA serves. I don't know where the rest of you all are from, but I come from LA. I lived 40 years in LA.
I am willing to do a completely different version of this on healthcare alone, because that's
saying it's another part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I am going to tell you that at this point, I am going to tell you what I have come together to see, and the 4 areas that I had in mind when I called this together, because I don't want us to get too far off track either, because again, I'm one person. So the 4 areas are employment, regardless of how. So employment, housing, and direct services, which is the regional center representation. Everything that entails, the paying for the staff, everything. So those are the areas that I consistently assist, and consistently every single one of them does not get the funding they need. So I call regional center services and every umbrella under them direct services, because you're going directly to the person and saying, we're going to help you out. So the money you need to do that, whether it's paying your staff, falls under that umbrella. And then you have housing, which is the house the person lives in, hence the Landerman Housing Alliance's presence. And then the employment side, people with DDID have the ability to work and should have the option to work. So when I called this group, that's how I saw the.
I guess I want to apologize, because I didn't realize when you were asking me that you're only viewing me as like Karen employment under.
No, it's not that I only it's not that I only view you. It's I was just trying to think how I was going to get this very diverse. Yeah. It's getting a very diverse group of people on a similar page, so we can come up with a plan it's tangible for next year.
Yeah, of course. I guess when I was giving you my perspective, I had my Nolan hat on, which
Oh,
Jay Nolan's a pretty big organization. They do supportive living and they
Oh,
do
yes. Yeah,
24/7 care. So
that's why I wanted to explain to you guys like where my mind goes, like why I strategically invited these every one of you guys I thought about before even sending out invites. So my thought process was very strategic. So thinking about your larger hat of where you all work at, which is employment, housing, and direct services, which I'm including Regional Center, ARCA, and every umbrella underneath that. I'm not asking you guys to come up with a solution today. I'm asking you to think about, in that umbrella, in that context, what do we have in common? And I know the legislature focuses on, and Raj, if you want to chime in here and help me explain this statistical end that plays such a big part in making what type of, when a legislature can say, yes, we can support this, they have limited choices to support bills. So they can't say yes to everybody. And I'm not going to go into all of that. That is why I've brought my legislative reps here, because I am not a politician. So just in general, do you guys want to go into that detail a little bit? And then it's up to you. I'm opening it up to you. If you don't want, I'll talk about what I've done and seen. But it's up to you, Raj or Liz. If you
Sure. Yeah, Jessica, I'd be happy to jump in here. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Raj Dillon. I work for Breeze, Southern California. I don't have any background in developmental disabilities. I work for an environmental health nonprofit organization. I do advocacy and public policy for Breeze, Southern California. But I did work for Senator Hertzberg for 5.5 years on his campaign and in his district office. And so that's when I met Jessica and got connected to Jessica, and I can just sort of provide, I guess, the advocacy component to, advocating for your organization, for your interests, and the kind of impact that can have on a legislator. Senator Hertzberg is someone who has, decades of experience, and so over the years he developed a strong relationship with a lot of communities in the San Fernando Valley that he represents, and so, having that connection to that particular legislator, having that relationship is really important. And I don't know where you all are located, but you guys are probably in all sorts of different districts all over the state. And so I think just from my perspective, I think one of the most important things that you all could do in advocating for your interests is to develop that relationship with your legislator and to explain why your organization is important, why it's unique, why there is a need for your issue to be addressed through the budget process. As Jessica was alluding to earlier, and as she mentioned, there are a lot of competing interests. There are a lot of different issues that need to be addressed all over the state. And so to be able to provide a personal connection to the issue and to demonstrate the need for Senator Hertzberg, that was data. He loves looking at the numbers, crunching the numbers. That could depend on your home district legislator, though. So developing the relationship not only with the legislator, but with staff as well. That's really important. And so that's just my 2 cents here as far as advocating for your interest and for the issues that are important to you. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. I'll even drop my email in the chat box. You can email me. Feel free to utilize me as a resource if you think there's any way that I can help. Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you, Raj, for coming, and thank you for your input. And I'm going to turn it to Liz. I don't know if you want to be put on the spot or if you just want to listen.
Happy to be. I don't consider this being put on the spot. I'm happy to participate and be a part of the discussion. I do apologize that at any point if I'm not kind of in my lane here. Again, I'm coming into this. I spoke with yesterday afternoon, so this is not really 100% understanding what we're going to go with here, but I think I have a grasp. So first, I want to say, thanks for having me, but you don't need me. You have Bridget, and she's amazing. And she has a decade and a half of experience understanding the process in both sides. I think I have I'm going into my 23rd year in the Capitol. I've always worked in the public policy space, but the bulk of my career was spent with the Women's Caucus. So I did work for all of the elected women in the Senate and the Assembly. And our policy areas are very, very human service centered. So this is my background, but I came to the Aging and Long-Term Care Committee 2 years ago, a little more than 2 years ago. I'm a caregiver in my personal life. I studied to be a special education teacher and came taking a job at the Capitol, and then I never left. So this is where I am. I think that your issues are issues that I understand. I'm not going to say that they're issues that I understand fully. I think my time with the Women's Caucus taught me that my knowledge base is a mile wide and an inch deep. So I really, really do benefit from good relationships and being able to check in with other people who do work daily in the field. So I'm going to speak a little bit about some things that I've heard. One, this area that you're talking about, policy and budget, it's not over. Last year was a year unlike any year that I've been a part of. We worked on the budget all the way until the end of session. We've done that before we ever had we've always had a July 15th budget deadline, but 10 years ago, it was passed in October. So I think that, the budget doesn't always follow, but since we did pass a constitutional amendment that doesn't pay our legislators past that July 15th deadline, we've been much more diligent about passing a budget on time. But we still continue to work budget trailer bills all the way through. I think when we're talking about funding, it's not over. In fact, this is your time. Now is the time. In the Assembly, just speaking from personal experience on the Assembly side, the Assembly requires anything in Budget Sub 1, which is our Health and Human Service Budget Subcommittee, to have a legislative champion. You have to have a member that stands behind your ask, not advocates, but an actual member who is willing to stand behind this ask. Now is a time, if you're looking for funding, to develop what you believe you need. Most often those deadlines for your budget asks come about a week just after bill introduction deadline. And our bill introduction deadline this year, I think, is the 18th of February. So look towards that later part of February, but now would really be the time to say, what do we want? Where do we need more? And I did hear that, we're not getting anything more from the federal government. About $5 billion came for aging and in my aging and long-term care sphere, and that goes much bigger. That involves IHSS, that involves lots and lots of different pots, and definitely lots and lots of different agencies. We only encumbered about $3 billion of that last year. So there's still $2 billion federal money that I anticipate seeing somewhere dropped into the budget that is going to be released next week. So I think that there's still a grab out there. What I thought I could bring to this conversation is really, as much as I appreciate everyone having connections to their individual legislators, those are incredibly important. There are times you can cannibalize one another. And that's when you're not on the same page. And that's a very harsh way to point out to you that when you come forward and you say, my issue is the most important issue, you have to realize that since we're talking about a pie, you brought up the pie, I did not bring up the pie. There is a part of that pie you could never touch. There's only so much space within your slice that you can actually get what you want. And if everybody comes out and says, let me in the front of the line, that's where you see those phenomenal fights, that ugliness that pits one group against another. I'm going to use an example that was a long-term approach from my time with the Women's Caucus, and that was around childcare. in recognizing that childcare is multifaceted in how it impacts lives. It impacts lives of parents who need to get back to work. It impacts the lives of the employers who are trying to use this as their workforce. And it involves the development of children. And so you have to look at it from various different perspectives. And what we found was we could put forward one of the best budget asks that we thought, and we would have someone that wasn't of those three, didn't feel that they got enough, that would try to sink the entire proposal. And that's not helpful. Childcare is a very, very nuanced space with lots of different pots of money and lots of different regions and different agencies that are a part of subsidized childcare. That's no different than all of the worlds that you work in. You pull from lots of different pots, you have lots of different oversight, and you also have to be very, very person-centered. And how do you do that? I think our greatest accomplishments when we started to come out and ask for $1 billion, which seemed very, very Austin Powers when we first started, like, we're going to ask for $1 billion and this is nuts. But what we did was we had a greater group of everyone that we thought touched the childcare sphere to come to a table and say, what's the biggest hurdle that we think? Everybody give me your pitch. And universally what we found was staying in this workforce is a problem. You don't get paid enough. You have really, really high turnover, and you can't access childcare when you need it. So what we said was the first thing that we felt we needed to do was shore up the workforce, shore up this workforce and make it something that's whole. And in doing that, we said everybody needs to support that ask. And then we promise that the next step is to increase the number of openings there are for children because our waiting list is too small. But if we have more people in the workforce, we can do that. And that was the next step. Then there was a third step about branching out and when do we ensure that the greatest number on our wait list at what ages are getting more. So I say that to you because just as I watched this grid so far, everyone had different and very, very intriguing and very interesting things that they brought forward. The one thing that we all could agree on across the spectrum of anyone that involves care is this workforce is suffering. And you never need to apologize for saying how important minimum wage work is. I get it. But I also absolutely get that there are times that you're hoping you have someone that stayed in this workforce and has a higher degree of experience. And with experience, you don't stay at minimum wage. So I think that if I just really encourage you all to find an opportunity to say, what is our, I kind of want to say, how do we triage, right? How do we say, what are our greatest issues right now? And if workforce is one of your biggest obstacles, then that has to be a conversation. How do you create a pipeline that people want to stay in this workforce? You know, with just going back to my experience in the aging community, skilled nursing is having an exodus of workforce, and it was already working on a shoestring, right? I mean, you were barely meeting needs, or you weren't, and you were having to pay fines for not meeting your staffing needs. But what happens when you have said that you cannot make enough money in this line of work, or you can go and take, even though that your heart is very, very much in caregiving work, you can go out and find another job that is now at home or allows you to care for your children at home or has more flexibility that can pay you more. So I think that you across the board, I agree that Jessica is saying, you know, we have a lot of commonality. I think even within your commonality, you need to come forward and figure out what are some of your biggest issues. And that's where you come after and ask to grab the money. And you can be as creative as you need to, and Bridget will be able to lead you through that in saying, sometimes you get really creative about one-time asks and you just ask for them over 10 years. And that gives you funding for 10 years. There are lots and lots of different ways. Particularly in the aging space, I don't see us having a huge amount of policy asks this year. A lot is going to be moving in the budget. So I don't know if I'm off track on this. You're welcome to ask me any questions.
Well, from my perspective as the host, you are not. You actually kind of brought us back to what I was aiming to do when I convened this group, which is, I'm not saying any individual sector is less than any other. I'm saying across the board, we have a lot in common. I brought this group together to connect with each other, number one. Number two, to continue this conversation, to figure out what are our commonalities? How can we create that budgetary ask? Because that's what I'm saying. I don't know how, but if we can figure out between myself and Bridget, if you're willing to like partner with me on this, because I mean, I'm a legislative consultant, but I've only been around for 3 years technically. So I'm willing to take help from anyone else that wants to help me carry this ask and bring this group to a larger commonality. To where can we meet? Where are our commonalities? Like, I don't know the answers to any of this right now, but this is what I was trying to get this group to think about. And where can we meet? And it's good to know. I mean, I know there's money in the budget, and I know the budget is not over. I just didn't want people to get stuck on this year without knowing that I'm also thinking of the next 2 years. So I'm not saying we have to do this year. I'm saying this can take until the next 2-year budget term, if that's what it takes to get fully what's needed, or get an ask that makes sense for all individuals involved.
Well, I don't want to like sink hopes here, but this is not going to happen this year or next year. I think the reality is you've all worked in this world and in this space long enough to know that you will always be fighting for funding. You will always need more.
Oh yeah.
And so I think that, you know, if anyone's ever undertaken a strategic plan, right, that strategic plan is long-term, and it should be fluid. Those who try to stick to it, I mean, if the last almost 2 years haven't told us, don't ever think that you're going to stick to a plan. We all have to be fluid. We all have to be adaptable. I think that you could put out a plan right now that says this is what we are going to do over the next 2 years, and you should be revisiting that constantly to say, actually, what we found was once rental assistance went away, housing became our biggest issue because rents rose like crazy. And that became, you know, we can't worry about anything else if someone feels like they're about to be homeless. You have to be addressing the fact if food insecurity is a problem, if the workforce is a problem, it should always be a working document. I mean, draft should remain on almost everything that we do for the foreseeable future. You know, this is we're constantly coming back and giving this a little tweak.
Right. That completely makes sense.
Thanks so much, Liz, for your thoughts. I'm not in the legislative world, but I know enough to know you can't just come at this process saying we want all of this now. We can have in our own heads what it is that we need to do, but the idea of triaging, kind of picking what are the top 2 things that all of us. Go ahead.
But Julie, it's okay if I call you Julie.
Of course.
Julie, I think it's really important to have that list should exist somewhere. Yeah. You know, I mean, I have little kids. If I didn't work off of a Christmas list, I would be looking at every online ad that comes to me. Maybe that would be good. Maybe that would be good. Maybe this would be good. But getting an actual list that sits in front of you, as I said, should constantly be evolving and changing, but it's that you're always recognizing what's rising to the top. What's rising to the top? Okay, we said we can all agree this is in our top 3. And if we all agree this is in our top 3, this should be our ask. And then it kind of shifts everything else. It moves everything else around. So, right. You know, the list needs to exist. And this is not just help in the legislature. this is kind of helping all the work that you're doing. I mean, even if you're just trying to get staff on board, or if you're trying to get your board of directors on board, because everybody comes with their own beliefs and everyone comes with their own thoughts. But in order to really make change and move forward, you all have to be behind what you're asking for.
Yeah.
Right.
If I could say something, I think this is where we almost become like hamsters in the wheel, because and we end up spending so much time coming to these meetings, right, with fantastic ideas, and sometimes they develop into something and sometimes they don't.
Okay.
I almost feel like the categories are quality of life stuff, right? So that housing is one of them, healthcare is one of them, direct services, those all make your quality of life better. And then I think that I think what happens within our culture, our social service culture, our philosophy is different across the board. So what someone thinks is proper housing is so different across the board that I don't think that sometimes we can ever all get on the same page to advocate for the same thing to make it a progressive movement.
Well, I am going to jump in right here, right now, as the person who hosted this event, and say I am willing to be that person that will because like I said, I contacted all of you guys for a reason. So I will be that person if need be to be tapping you guys. I mean, I'm going to send out a document of today and to everybody that's here and ask the questions that I've been asking this whole time. And I'll be the person to be the one getting people to constantly think and get this process started. Because like I said, I don't know the answers, but I mean, from this concept came because I'm not a legislator, but I just thought to myself from a social service perspective that it would be most idealistically effective if we could all figure out where we all intersected and to create an ask based on that. Now, how to do all that? 3 years doing this, new. That's why I'm open to talking to everybody. I don't know everything. But so I will be the person to keep this group on track. If you guys want to pursue this I know it's a new concept. When I created this idea, I wasn't even sure people were going to show up. So I am willing to take on the responsibility of guiding people, of jotting down your ideas, linking where they're all in common and putting it out to the group. I'll do all that. So the ask can be built. I'm willing to do that backup work. That's what I do. So just so you know, it's out here if you guys want to. And again, it's just a lot. I really appreciate everyone who's spoken. There's a couple of people who have been quiet this whole time.
I'd like to, Jessica, I'd like to take an opportunity to speak.
Please.
And so I'm Darren Lowndes with the Housing Consortium of the East Bay, a housing nonprofit based in Oakland, serving the same catchment area as Regional Center of the East Bay. And I'm also a board member of the Lanterman Housing Alliance, and our board president is here, and that's Dan Schenkel from California Housing Foundation in Southern Cal. So Jessica, you said it well, that we're, for social service folk, we here to serve folk, serve people. Housing's, that plus something a little different. And just for clarity, our fate on the housing side is not so much tied to DDS in the DDS budget. We, as you may be aware, the Lanterman Act does not guarantee housing for folks. And the only type of housing that the regional centers typically fund are kind of in the congregate licensed group home setting. And the Letterman Housing Alliance was established and continues to fight for more independent and integrated housing options for folks. So those for folks who are utilizing SLS, ILS, or no type of daily support, but live in their own place, have a lease and have a key. So we're slightly different as far as who we go to, or which money trees we shake. And we focus much more on HCD, housing and community development. And specifically in recent years, we've been focused on the multifamily housing program, and we've made some budget asks. We also, we floated some legislation a couple of years ago. In fact, it was introduced just before COVID hit, and so that it was torpedoed immediately. But just for some context, is we've been having a very difficult time getting a foothold in the budget process and through legislation. And I think a lot of that is due to that misconception I just highlighted, that I think the powers that be think that we are funded by Bridget, that we're funded adequately through the DDS budget to create housing solutions for people. And that just isn't facts. And I take my responsibility for the fact that that's not better understood. But I just wanted to bring all this up because as we talk as a group, and I'm thankful to you, Jessica, for bringing this group together. As we talk as a group, please keep in mind that as things currently stand, we're focused on DDS dollars to solve the housing problem. That's not how it doesn't mean that has to be that way forever. It would be amazing if DDS had more money for housing to invest or to match those dollars from other programs and agencies. That would be and we would love it, and we wouldn't sneeze at it. We would embrace it, and we would go make the most for every dollar that DDS could secure. But we just, our milieu is bigger than, and I think that's kind of, that's also how things work with employment. You've got the DDS track, but you've got the OR, and so I wanted to just put that out there, and then I'll step back.
Yeah, Liz, you wanted to.
Well, what I just wanted to say is I think that, Darren, you've done a great job of explaining how nuanced what you do in one sector, right? And around housing, that's one sector of what we talked about, how nuanced it is and how many different pools you pull from. And at times I feel like you might come into a meeting and think that you're speaking with a legislator. And I mean, imagine if you were, at the Thanksgiving table, you had a nephew home from college, smart kid, doesn't work in your field, doesn't know anything about what you do, and you started talking to him about your budget ask. It's like, what are you talking about? I have no idea. That sometimes giving the whole background of, starting in this year, the Land Term Housing Act, whoa, too much information. I think that you have to be really, really strategic in what you're asking for, and without making it overly complicated to understand, because keep in mind, the budget chair is going to go ask that member, hey, tell me a little bit more about your budget ask. They don't want to look like a moron. And so sometimes I think a lot of asks get passed because it's just too hard to grasp. That's why you have some members who have been the champions in some areas for years, because they've spent so long understanding a topic. That it can be really, really hard. So as you guys are building what you're going to choose to move into, be ready to be subject matter experts on things, but recognize as a subject matter expert, you need to try to educate in a very, very general way.
And I will take the lead on that as well, if need be. Again, it's all part of what I do. I help people figure out how to generalize. I help do all of that.
I think what happens is we're like the poor family members at the Thanksgiving table, and we've gotten really creative at shaking many, many trees
Mhm.
to get money because one pot has not been enough for us. And so,
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I also think that in doing, I mean, I'm working in the aging space now. Aging has been in the back of the line for years. And when they finally got some money in the budget,
they didn't know what
it
to
was
do.
like, well, they were just so excited. And I was like,
Yeah.
wait, that doesn't stop us. We don't go getting back of the line. Now we just go down the list. We got to
Yeah.
we have to keep staying relevant. We have to keep moving forward. And I think that's where you guys just need to get that foothold where you're finally getting traction, and then you just keep moving. But it was 20 years. And part of that was because of the master plan for aging. I've never been a part of a plan like that. And perhaps that's what you need to see for developmental and intellectual disabilities, is a master plan.
It is 2:00. I want to respect people's time. I'm not going to stop this meeting if people want to stay on, continue this conversation. I think it's great, but you guys did say 1 to 2 as a large group. So I'm not going to hold anyone captive from their other obligations today. I'm going to let you guys continue if you want, but I am officially saying that if you need to go, you can.
I do, but thank you, Jessica. Look forward to seeing where the conversation continues to.
Oh yes, I will be keeping tabs on everybody. Thank you guys.
Thanks for the warning. See ya.
Thank you, Jessica. I know I didn't chime in today, but I'll have some more feedback at the next meeting.
Well, everybody has my professional email address now.